Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Rainbow Room International podcast and the origin stories. Today I'm joined with David Nicolson, who is the director at the Royal Exchange Square Salon, but has been with the brand since 1987. It will be a slightly unique conversation as he's not only one of my best friends, but was also my hairdresser in 1988 that got me into the idea of being a hairdresser myself. It's going to be pretty in-depth. We're going to probably cover 1,000 bases. So strap in, stay tuned and enjoy. David.
Ricardo.
Hello. So we'll start as we're going on. Choice of two. And before we even start this, I've already been told that both of my choices were rubbish, by the way. But anyway, if I held a gun to your head and you had to pick which one of these two chocolate bars you were going to buy, what would it be?
It would be the Whisper.
It's Whisper Gold.
Yeah.
All right, okay. So, going for a bit of a push and getting ahead. Whisper Gold's starting to win on the Lindors. Do you want it, or will I just keep it?
I would never refuse chocolate.
Oh, well, there you go. That's good. There you go. You can have a wee
Excellent.
stretch over for that. Right, okay. So, same question for everybody at the start. Where were you born? Where did it all happen?
Okay, I was born in Glasgow, 1965, many years ago, and moved around different parts of the country just as I was growing up. My dad worked for an oil company, so it was very much, we moved because his career was the thing that happened. Last sort of family home was down in Ayrshire, and at that stage, I'd got into Glasgow art school. I was going to do architecture, and I wanted a Saturday job so that I could prove how grown up and responsible I was to my parents, and then they'd buy me a flat, and then I could live a life of debauchery whilst at art school. I thought that would be tricky to go back to my mum and dad's at night in the kind of states I was planning to get into before painting.
Right.
So a Saturday job was key to this, and I went looking for a Saturday job one day, went to a music shop. They didn't need anybody, and there was a hairdresser's next door, and I just walked in and basically asked if they had any sort of Saturday work.
Job that way. So see, school-wise and stuff, because what's been quite interesting is just talking to people about who they were, because obviously a lot of the people that are going to be watching this is their own, either people that are joining the brand or trainees and stuff, and so school-wise, primary school and secondary, were you then having to move around and go to different schools all the time?
Yeah, I was at 4 primary schools and 3 secondary schools, just between Scotland and England.
And obviously now, looking back, that's pretty tricky. And, you kind of really want to put your kids through that kind of thing. You would see that now as being a difficult thing. Was it just the norm for you? It was just like you're the new guy in the school? And
Yeah, I was always a new guy. Unfortunately, I'm quite antisocial by nature. So, I never had issues. I always had a love of music and art anyway. So, I like time on my own. And when the hairdressing sort of thing became something that I'd thought about, everybody thought this was really funny because of the nature of person I was, that I wouldn't necessarily be very good at kind of pretending to kind of get on with people, and and just the acting side of showing an interest in other people.
I don't think that. All these years of knowing you, I don't think you're not any social, David.
But that was it was the situation. So I started the following week. I went in for a trial, and I just loved it. I absolutely loved the fact that at that stage I was I was a young goth. So your appearance was everything.
Aye.
And all you did was moan because you couldn't get in places. There was only certain bars you could go to. You wouldn't get in to a lot of places because of your appearance.
So was the God thing, were you doing that in secondary school as well?
Yeah.
And what was your kind of academic career like at high school? Were you kind of into stuff? Or?
Yeah, I was always into art. I was always into graphic design. I enjoyed English. I was terrible at math. Even in 6th year, I was still doing arithmetic, but I'd given up. I was writing songs at that stage. And then eventually I was taken out of the arithmetic or the maths class and put in to a Latin class. because my guidance teacher for the year, that was his subject. So they thought that this is going to be really helpful. We'll keep an eye on him. So I just wrote songs and poems and generally felt that from a very young age that numbers, it's not everything. It's not the be all and end all.
Yeah.
It was a generation at school that were IQ tested and moving around all the time. My mum told everybody, "Oh, he's smart. He's got this great IQ." So my attitude was always, give me a better teacher. Teach me a better way or another way.
And there must be another way.
Yeah, which again, generally, all that happened when you said that was that you sat outside the headmaster's office for hours waiting to get shouted at.
Yeah. This tone of rebellion will continue to come through this.
It's just questioning. I was brought up to think that you need to think for yourself. You've got to make your own decisions. You need to be accountable for things. But yeah, questioning everything. And the definition of what the education system at that stage, and to a certain extent it's still the same, everybody puts so much pressure on achievement. The journey and what you learn and how you learn is not really still taught in schools, which is a shame.
It's not what did you go through on the way of getting there. So art school was the plan.
Yeah.
From leaving high school, and had you get accepted to Glasgow?
Yeah, I got a place at Glasgow, and that was on your prelim results and things in those days. So.
And did you have to go in and do the interview and take a
portfolio,
or was it because
I'd already done portfolio work, and when I'd been down at school in England doing my O levels, a lot of the O level subject was you had a year to produce a collection of work that would fill X amount of square sort of meters. So a lot of the portfolio work I'd already done when I'd been doing my O levels, but of course coming back up here and then going into 5th year to do hires, I just found it really frustrating. The art that you were doing was very different. The teacher's basis for whether you were good or not was on whether you did the apple core. Like the Apple Core.
Yeah.
And of course at that stage I was into surrealism and Dadaism and all these other different types of art, and I would stand and argue with my teacher that, what would have happened with any of these kind of classical art, Van Gogh, do you think his art teacher says that vase is rubbish, doesn't do anything like that? So I just always felt that art should always be an interpretation of what you see and what you feel about the job. And it still bothers me that people define their abilities by what other people have told them.
So when did the decision to go from kind of art and painting and your surrealism and everything and then go to architecture? Because it's quite a shift, it's not really.
Well, the architecture was just, as I said earlier, for my generation, your parents, you took the advice. They advised and told you, oh, you should do this, you'll be good at this. So I never questioned it. I just, for the years of being told that this is what would be good, this is what you should do, I never questioned it at all. I just assumed, well, that's what's going to happen. So, you just worked away, did what you needed to do.
Well, in those days, it would be seen to be more of a career at the end of it. There would have been an end to it. Whereas...
Yeah, and my dad's background was he was a quantity surveyor by trade.
Yeah.
So all of these areas were things that he had obviously felt, well, this would be good for you to do, and I never really questioned it at all. And even when I started in the salon on a Saturday, very quickly, I was just fascinated watching.
So were you at art school?
No, I was still at school.
Right.
I was still in 6th year.
Right.
So you got your prelim results before Christmas. Then you sent the stuff off. Then that was it. Yeah, you got your place for the August or September, whenever the art school started. So, I was just still finishing off my 6th year.
Right.
Going and working in the salon on the Saturdays. And then I quite quickly asked if I could go to training nights. Because I just loved, my understanding would be the same as a client. You're just looking at, you're watching somebody, they pull a bit of hair out and then they cut it and then they pull another bit of hair out and then they just do all this stuff.
Yeah, but
and
why?
Then at the end of
it,
at the end of it, you've got somebody who is sitting in a chair, happy, they look different.
And where was this? Where did you?
This was in Kilmarnock,
Right.
and it's going back 40 odd years ago. So you know, it was a big salon in Kilmarnock, and at the time, I mean, people queued. I mean, people on Saturdays, you know, when you were going out for lunches. I mean, you were walking. It was on the first floor, but you were walking down the staircase along the corridor, past people just waiting to see if they could get in to get a haircut.
Yeah.
So it was a busy salon. I think it was about 15 hairdressers. But it was a salon where, you know, you came in as a client, hung your coat up, put a gown on, went through to the basin, got shampooed, sat in front of the chair, and the hairdresser said, "What do you want?"
Yeah.
And then completely ignored what the client said they wanted, and then gave them what they felt they should have.
Yeah. Well, for Scottish hairdressing historians, I'm sure there's many out there.
Yeah.
Maybe not. But it was Kenneth Arthur.
Yeah.
That who is definitely, for those that remember Kenneth or grew up underneath him, was definitely a unique individual at the time as well, and did have an amazing reputation and had a unique way of looking after people. But the idea of a consultation to where we've got it now probably did not exist.
But I did learn, because as the junior left with a traumatised client who is trying to grow her hair, and you're now doing a style dry on something that you watched them cut 4 inches off. And I remember standing thinking, that's quite a lot. You know, she said she's grown it. But in those days, clients didn't complain. You know, they put up with it. And that was the way things were at that stage.
So at what point of going in as a Saturday guy, still being at school, and then maybe taking part in the training nights, that you then went, actually,
it was
detour time, I'm going to do this?
Yeah, I mean, it was the week when I was meant to go to Frasers, you know, for art school.
Right.
That's when I announced officially, you know, to my parents, I'm not going to be an architect. I'm going to do this full time. So it would have been at that time that I then went in full time. So at the end of the summer, and yeah, that was it. I started, you know, my apprenticeship.
And how did the news get taken?
Well, my mum was fine. You know, my dad, I mean, basically my dad just said Jesus wept for 3 years. Every time he looked at me, thought I was absolutely wasting my life. And that, you know, there was 100 things I could be doing that would have been better than what I'd chosen to do.
Right. So it wasn't any of that, just, well, as long as you're doing it and you try to do it to your best, it was, this is a nightmare.
Yeah, it was
I'm
just
not behind it.
He really just thought I just wasting any talent he thought I had to do this. But it never bothered me at all. I mean, I really enjoyed everything about the job. I was learning all day, every day. And say, Ken, I was his assistant, and he was brutal. You know, you knew he would talk you up behind your back to people, but never to your face. I mean, you get bawled at, you get things thrown at you. Every haircut, I had to stand with him, and he just used his finger or his scissor point to sort of point and show angles constantly, all the time. If you'd looked away when he was doing the thing, you get hit in the back of the head with a comb.
Yeah, hairdressing education was a slightly different thing.
It was a completely different thing. You were never allowed to sit when you were working. The clients all had to be called Mrs. or Miss or Lady this or whatever. And it was very, very disciplined. You know, I get a folded £1 note every day in the morning saying, right, we're busy, that's your lunch. So you never got to eat. You stayed on late. And when there was shows and all the different things that we did, you know, you were just expected to be there for all these things, and you wanted to do it anyway. You wanted to learn as much as possible, because I was the oldest junior in town at that stage as well. You know, I was 2 years older than everybody else. So you were conscious of the fact that you had this mad red sweatshirt with KA on it, you know, and of course I'm a goth. I mean, so all I wore was black.
Right.
So this was a traumatic experience. So the drive to get qualified was as much to do with not having to wear this red top.
That's brilliant. I love that. So, how did the goth vibe go down in the salon? Was it?
Nobody cared.
Yeah.
I mean, that was, you know, from the get go, it was a thing that really surprised me. Nobody cared at all. And the one or two clients that would maybe have been a bit bothered, you know, it was one of the hairdressers. He says, dead easy. This is the answer to give. You shouldn't be worried about me. They did that. You know,
Yeah.
be more worried about them
Yeah.
than me who's got it. So, yeah, it was never really an issue at all. And it's funny, you know, we're now in times where everybody has to be inclusive, this, that, and the next thing. It was completely, that was the world in those days. It's just nobody talked about anything.
It wasn't a
You
thing.
know, you had all sorts of people working in these environments, and really outlandish characters.
Well, it was almost as if hairdressing was a safe space before these things
Yeah,
had been invented.
became
you know,
officially.
it wasn't a thing. And so you talked about the idea of staying late for training, getting ready for hair shows. And so was that a big bit of the sort of carrot to do the career from an early stage?
Not so much the show. I mean, as the years have gone on, I never had the patience for photographic work, and I never found a photographer in the years when I was doing a lot of these things. I never found somebody I could get the connection with that could understand and interpret my ideas. So I was never satisfied with these things, and I like the live action of a client. You know, the kind of poring over details for hours and hours. You know, I'm not that guy. You ask anybody. I mean, you know, I've got my salon. I'm not a detail guy. Never have been. And I need people around me that can do all these things that I'm just not very good at naturally doing anyway. So, the show, the buzz, the teamwork is the thing. You know, so for all the involvement with shows and artistic work and everything else, you know, the enjoyment for me was always about the kind of what you're part of creating and what you're part of has been created, and you're playing a part in it, and it doesn't really matter. You know, I mean, we talk about, you know, the art team, and you know, when you start out, when you're young, you're in charge of getting the pizzas. Then the next stage, you're in charge of making sure that you've ordered the right pizza, and then you hold the pins, and then you do this and that and that and that. You know, so the journey of doing these things and the involvement of that, and just the sheer lack of ego that you have in these situations where everybody's focus is on what the end thing is going to be, you know, the show, the presentation, whatever, and people fall into place and understand where their skills and strengths are. And that is, for me, the kind of the artistic side isn't so much about what the finished product is, it's the creative process and seeing how people grow and how they react and respond through things. You know, for me, that was always the enjoyment.
So off the back of that, right? So how long were you training for?
It was a 3-year apprenticeship in those days.
And was it an old school proper apprenticeship? Where
Old
you
school
got your papers
apprenticeship.
at the end
Yeah.
and all that? Because
And
obviously
then,
Alan talks about doing that and Linda talks about doing that. And I think the chances are you might be the last, and then it'll be like John and everybody will be back on. I think John's, you know, talking to him and getting ready for his podcast. I think he's talking about, you know, being fast tracked and things like that. So I think you're the kind of last.
Yeah, it was 3
one doing
years.
the old school sort of thing.
And your last 6 months you were a tinter and permer.
Right.
So all you did all day was wind perms.
Yeah.
You were doing maybe 6 or 8 perms an hour.
I would love to see you winding a perm.
For 9 hours a day.
Yeah.
You know, every day you were doing these things.
So what's that, 80 what? What?
That would have
1980?
been 80, maybe 1984, 85, something round about then.
And so you then go on the floor. How long did you stay on the floor there?
No, well, when I've qualified, I wanted to do things that were different to what the salon was doing. I had this idea that it would be cool to talk to the person, you know, and not see them with their hair wet and a gown on.
Yeah.
And that, you know, you could do a consultation and maybe, you know, I wouldn't necessarily say, I probably maybe didn't use those words, but the idea of sitting down with somebody first and having a chat and looking at their hair and all that, all the things we now do.
So obviously off the back of, you know, even Linda came to Rainbow Room off the back of being at a seminar and hearing Alan talking about these things. Had that been in your orbit by then, or was this just something?
No, just not at all. I mean, I was still based down there. I mean, the only connection I had with Glasgow at that stage in life was that we were into gigs.
Yeah.
You know, I used to sort of mess about and play with band stuff, and you would come to gigs. So, and again, down where we stayed in Ayrshire, you know, there was few places you could go. They wouldn't let you in. You know, so there was a small group of us as friends, and everybody had a mohawk of some sort, white or black. One of my pals had these big dreadlocks he'd put in with Evo stick. I mean, he ended up,
don't try that at home, kids.
And he was an albino guy,
right?
And he looked like one of the baddies on one of the Matrix films. The two brothers. Yeah. He looked like that. So we never get in anywhere. Yeah. So it was coming up to Glasgow purely for gigs and to go to, you know, the odd bar and nightclub. That was the only sort of thing with Glasgow. So no, I finished my training, spoke to the boss about what I wanted to do, and basically I was patched, as they say. It was just like, no, we don't do that.
No happening.
So being a grown up, I decided to take my gift elsewhere. So I resigned, and then, but I was still living with my folks at that stage.
So you hadn't plan B? Was the
no, I had no plan B at all. I just thought, well, if you can't see how brilliant this idea is, then I'll take it somewhere else. Right. And at that stage, there wasn't anywhere else. Then it was coming into summer, so I went interrailing with a mate. Went to go around Europe. That was the plan for a month, and it kind of didn't quite happen. We kind of got waylaid in Amsterdam for quite a long time, and then came back broken. Is that okay to say?
It's okay.
And then I applied. I then went back and spoke to my boss, and he put me in touch with staff at Trevor Sorby's. He thought that would be a better fit for me. Yeah. So went down there, had interviews, and then I was down there. I was living down in London at that point, and that's the first I'd ever heard of Rainbow Room. You know, so I'd started in the salon, and
so you heard about Rainbow Room International?
Yeah, when I was in Sorby's.
You were working in Sorby's at that time?
Yeah, I'd gone down, got the interviews, and I was literally there for 2 weeks. And in that fortnight, I just quickly realised that it's not really going to matter how hard I work here. You know, I'll get a chance if somebody leaves. You know, it just felt like I kind of know what I was hoping it was going to be. The clients I was getting, there was no young people at all, because they didn't have the money. It was expensive, you know, because of where it was.
Was that Covent Garden?
Yeah, it was in Covent Garden. And at some point within that 2 weeks, I had no money. So, you know, you went to do hair things because if you were helping out, you would get fed, you would get something. Or if there was hair shows on, there was always going to be free booze and nibbles and things. So, and it was there that I saw. I can't even remember where it was, but I just saw Rainbow Room. I'd never heard of the company. And I saw these people on stage, and I'm assuming it would have been Alan, maybe Linda. Don't really remember, but I didn't really understand what they were doing with the haircuts. And I didn't really actually, most of it I didn't like the look of, but I was fascinated by trying to understand how they did it. How did they make that look like that? Yeah. And just watching and listening, I don't know, it just did. It sparked off something.
It sparked something, yeah.
And then you started talking to the people that I knew, and then the people back home that were still involved in hairdressing, just friends. And everybody had really strong opinions about Rainbow Room at that sort of stage. But they all thought they're a wee bit out there, they're a wee bit different. And I started kind of feel, well, I've not found people that get me, that understood. If I talk about hair to people, they didn't seem to have the same passion. Their interest was about making the money, or about being busy, or about being known in the town. I never really cared about any of those things. It was a craft that from day one, that's what excited me. The ability to know what you wanted to do, and to learn the skills, to be able to know before you've done it how it's going to look. Yeah. And then you start to realise you've got to learn about the billion types of hair, the billion growth patterns, the skull shapes, and it was just a constant journey of just looking and trying things and learning things. And from my point in training, I never cared about what the reaction of the person I was cutting was.
Yeah.
And as a trainee, I had a sister that was younger than me. She was 2 years younger. So most of my clients, or victims, as I referred to them in the day, were all my sister's friends. So when somebody at that age is sitting in the chair and you're whacking the hair off and they're getting upset, they don't do anything. They still just sit there so you can finish it.
Yeah.
So, you know, the parents would then be straight on the phone, but it was not me getting it, it was the boss. So I never had to go through any pain of doing things. And then eventually you understand that you've got to try and make the person happy as well.
It's customer service.
But it wasn't really in my remit at all. I've got to do this. So that's what you're getting.
So when was so how long were you at Sword before?
Probably just over a fortnight.
Right.
And
then what was your initial approach to?
Well, I came back up and I mean, it was Linda's salon round on the other side of the square from me. And I just walked in one morning. It's just, you know, just introduced myself. Hi, I'm looking for a job as a stylist. You know, and the girl on the desk sort of just, oh, hold on, you know, makes a phone call, said, no, it's okay, we're not looking. I'm like, all right, okay. But then I thought, well, maybe, you know, so I go back home and the next day, well, maybe somebody's been run over. Maybe somebody's left.
Yeah.
So I went in every day.
Did you?
I mean, every day. By the end of that first week, the receptionist who I knew was called Pat.
Right.
She just liked me. You know, so at the end of that week, oh, hi, David. No jobs yet. Right, okay. So eventually one day, because the salon had the downstairs, and I'd been in loads every day, just seeing maybe somebody's left, maybe they've been run over. And I was standing at the desk, and it was Alan that came up the stairs. And I'd never seen him. I hadn't seen anybody other than the receptionist. So he comes up the stairs, and I think the reception was, oh, this is this guy.
This guy. That's introduced us.
Who's basically been stalking and pestering us for the last fortnight. And I can't remember what he word for word said, but it was more or less, he's right, go and get models, come back in half an hour. So you had to go and get a few models. Yeah. So I did it, you know, so which is why when any of my guys turn and say, oh, I can't do this, I tell you, if you want to do something badly enough, you'll do it. So
do you know what's amazing on that point? I had a client in yesterday in the salon, and she still talks about the day somebody came up to her in Royal Exchange Square to ask her if she wanted a complimentary haircut at Rainbow Room, and she talked about going down the basement and doing all that, and how special. At first she thought, oh, is this dodgy? Yeah. And do they not know what they're doing? And then how special. And we cannot put the point across enough that all of our clientele and all of our education was built. Yeah. That is what we're not making it up. We're not making the story up to try and tell the new assistants and the new trainees coming through. We literally went on the street, grabbed people by the shoulders of their jacket and escorted them into that salon, and invariably chopped all their hair off. But that's exactly what we did. So you're basically doing a trade test then for Alan and Linda.
Did the trade test, and then, you know, that was it. You know, I got 3 models, just going out onto Buchanan Street. And it was tricky because you're meeting some stranger, convincing them, and then literally holding them. Right, I now need to find another 2 people.
Yeah.
So
don't move.
Did all of that. Anyway, went back, did the haircuts, got the job, and that was it. And that would have been, I think it was about May 1987. And at that point, you know, the salon, there was 3 salons at that stage actually, but you know, you felt really strong rivalry in those days between 15 Royal Exchange Square, which was Linda's salon, and Buchanan Street, which was the first one and was Alan's. But it was just a real, it was just a very creative, it felt like a very creative place. Standbys were £4.50. And at that stage, you know, a lot of the hairdressers there were just, you know, that kind of mindset where, like, they didn't really want to do that. You know, it was a bit beneath them to be doing the £4.50s. and I didn't have a clientele, so I didn't really care, you know. So, you know, my clientele was built on standbys and models, because if you go out and find somebody that you want to cut their hair, you know, if you can build up a clientele of people you want, it's much easier, it's much less random and much less hard work than just leaving it to chance.
Yeah.
For
So
people.
so were you almost going out and cherry picking, going, I like the look of the cut of your jib.
Yeah,
you look like
basically.
you're part of my tribe, and I want to
and you
surround
would
myself
sort of-
with people like that.
And these were the people that then, you know, you saw when you were going out at night, if you were out in a bar or going out clubbing and whatever.
So did you do that too? Did you do a lot of self promotion within your social?
Yeah, it just always bothered me from day one. If somebody I knew, and you know, they were in my friend group, if I didn't do their hair, I couldn't. You know, it bothered me. And generally, you develop that kind of, you know, you've got your opinions very quickly on what you think is right and what is tasteful and everything else. So you generally looked at everybody else's haircuts and just thought, man, they're terrible. You know, I need to fix that. And you would say it like that. You were quite blunt. But when you know what needs to be done with something, because for me it was always about skull shape and the face shape. That's it. It doesn't really matter about anything else. So you can see when something's not right much more quickly than I can see when something is right.
So how quickly did you notice the difference between where you trained, where you'd spent some time down south, and then the start of your career in 15? Did you notice that it was all about those things, and the face shapes and the skull shapes and the different kind of hair and the different kind of textures, and then getting to do your consultation that you finally got to do?
Yeah, it was just for me very much. You know, Linda was my boss at that stage, and she was just what would be the how would you describe? I mean, her work was flawless. Do you know what I mean? Every line was just perfect, and it was that sort of detail that you could see. You could see sort of, you know, just, and again, the sections were, you were working quite closely. You were all quite close together anyway.
Yeah, how quickly did it take you to go from the basement to the top floor?
Well, I think I don't remember that the hierarchy. You know, at the stage I was at, I don't remember being part of that. So I can't really remember. My sort of earliest memories of being upstairs, because there was a time Alan was working in that salon as well. Yeah. At that point, you know, he was doing some days in 15, and then some in Buchanan Street. And my first day, I found out years later, was the first day we were doing shiatsu.
Wow, right.
You know, so I'd had the training when I started. You know, had my induction and got all the training. But really, I was about the only one that was doing it. You know, when Linda wasn't in, nobody was bothering, and I didn't understand it, and I didn't know how else to do it. So
this was
that was what I was shown. Yeah. But my early sort of memory, I was upstairs at one point, and I had a Jane. I'd done his hair a few times. He had massive ears. I mean, really, really big ears, and he was really self-conscious of these ears. And he was a kind of slightly gruff older guy, and I was working beside Alan, and for whatever reason, first section, took this section right off. So there's no way it was his ear was going to be exposed. But a lot of guys used to sit and read a paper. Aye. Which is in the old days, you used to get these big white things that were giant, print and pictures that filled you in on the day's goings on. And he just heard the rustle, he looked down at the paper, and then he just went berserk. And as soon as he started going berserk, I realised what I'd done. And of course, Alan was at the next section, you know, so like, fantastic. So anyway, got him all calmed down. It was all fine. So that's my early sort of memories of being upstairs. I think, Jerry, everybody, we liked the downstairs better. You know, in our mind, downstairs was kind of, it was lower ceilings, it was just cooler. It wasn't drafty either, because you didn't have the front door opening and that sort of whole open plan bit.
You didn't mind the fact that, that's the goth in you, that there was no windows. In the
that's it, no daylight either.
There's no daylight in there, that's it. Nearer to the staff room to go smoking as well. So
that was it, you could see it. Everybody smoked. So
how we all survived that staff room without secondary lung cancer? Well, for somebody like me that didn't smoke and I trained down there, I don't know. But...
yeah, it just shows how fit and healthy we all are.
Did you start to see, was it even in your head that there was a career projection within the brand, or were you just into the idea of, I just want to do my thing at the standard I want to do it at?
I think initially I wanted to get as good as I felt I could get. And there was, I was there at a start of what then, we can only look back, was just huge changes. There was a lot of staff there that I couldn't remember their names now. A lot of people were starting to leave, and new people were coming in. So John started not long after me, and then Coco started, and then Sam and Adrian, Luke started, and all these people, they all started coming in as I had started sort of, I just started getting busy quite quickly.
And Glasgow changed then, because you're leading up to the whole city of culture thing and all that, and they started jet washing and sandblasting everywhere, and it started to get better looking. Princess Square opened, kind of clothes shops were starting to get trendier, the club scene was starting to build up.
It was just, there was
a whole movement in the town at the one time, and the great thing is, you would always hope that hairdressing was kind of in the middle of that, whether it's food, clothes, any part of culture that way. Hairdressing's usually somewhere in the middle of it. So Glasgow was kind of changing then as well.
Yeah,
wasn't
there was lots going on. There was lots of good clubs. I mean, there was loads of clubs. And everybody worked and partied, and as a young hairdresser you didn't have the money, but you hung about with the older hairdressers that did have the money, so you could get to places that you wouldn't have gone in to with your own friend groups because they probably wouldn't let you in, so you had Charlie Parker's, you just had a lot of bars and clubs that were quite they were full of, there was an affluence about the people in them. A lot of people from fashion and hairdressing and music. And it was just this melting pot of things. And the salons, it was busy. These are the days where you'd be doing 180 clients a month. Yeah.
Well, that was the thing. I was going to say, how long did it take you from joining to really establish a kind of like a proper full clientele?
I'm terrible when I look back and trying to remember specifics. Yeah. I don't think it took long to get that busy. Yeah. And at some point in that, I had kind of started realising that, I now need, when you're the new guy, you don't need help because you're doing it all on your own and you've got the space and the time. But then you start getting busier and then you start needing help. So then we became aware, the noses were getting out of joint because I'm this new guy. And some of the sort of the senior guys at that time, I wasn't really buying into the whole, I want to be in your gang. I've always just quite like being in my gang of myself. Yeah. And then you start working with an assistant, and then, they start helping you, and, you can see, invest the time in them, and they'll pay you back with support and help to be able to, to do more clients, more colours, whatever. And then at some point in that, you start kind of just managing a person. And then all of a sudden, they're getting better tips than the other assistants. And the other assistants are then kind of, so I kind of, it sort of organically, I started being in charge of 1, 2, 3, 4, and then all of a sudden, the assistants.
And were you staying back for the training? And
I would always,
Wednesday nights and all that kind of stuff.
I can't even remember what night, but you would stay for training because you always. It's just great. Yeah. Passing on knowledge is what the job for me. That's a big part of it.
My saddest loss with just the way that the world is now, in that everybody did the training night. Somebody stayed back to teach you, so it was up to you to stay back and teach somebody else. And we all trained at the same time. We all started and finished at the same time so that we could present to each other. And it really did build the team as we know it. And for all the circumstance and the way the world is now, we can't really do it the same way. And that's my biggest loss in the 35 years of me being in the industry, that I can't no matter what, I can't recreate that in the rules now.
No,
that's the bit that bugs me the most.
I think things have changed, but you still get young apprentices coming in, and our job is to expand what their understanding of what's possible is. We're in different time. 40, 50 years ago, you had celebrity hairdressers. You had names. Even clients would know some of these names. If you name drop Nicky Clark, clients would know who these people were.
Yeah.
Trevor Sorbet, Stephen Way. some of these characters, and even back to 50s with Mr. Teasy Weezy, Raymond, and all these kind of characters. Nowadays, it's chefs. People know chefs.
Yeah.
They don't know what their food's like, but people know about chefing much more, and it's just, I think these things are cyclical. Our job is to kind of make the kids see this is what's out there, this is what you can get involved in, and the ones that are going to be really good and motivated will do it, because it's at the end of the day I know nothing about football, as you know.
Yes, I do know. Absolutely.
But
he and Haw in that order.
But I guess that there must be squillions of footballers in the world. But how many are really good? Just a handful. So it's a similar thing. There's millions of hairdressers all over. Most of them are mediocre. Some are dangerous. And there's a small sort of percent in the higher echelons of just skills and abilities, and if you're going to do anything, you want to do it to the best of your ability.
We're trying to get you to the World Cup,
and it's trying to impart that to the younger students coming in.
So you kind of naturally progressed into a kind of managerial role, and at what level? So were you still at stylist level and all that?
I was still a stylist, and in those days you get told you were getting promoted.
Right, so there wasn't by the time I came in, there was the parameters. You had to hit this, hit that, and hit the next thing. That wasn't there. It was just literally you're bringing in that amount of money now. I can charge more.
You're now filled with X amount of this. So if you put a price up, you're going to lose some clients, but that will give you the gap to more, and you can charge more. Your commission's high, your target. So it was a way you could then see, I can earn more, and so on and so on.
Well, it was that concept of losing 20% of the clientele to get the next level.
So that's kind of how it worked at that point. And the whole sort of idea of promotions and targets, it kind of came in because it became just underwhelming. People were getting the promotion, but there wasn't really a song and dance. There was no razzmatazz around it. And at a point, it just shifted and changed for whatever reasons. And then the structure sort of came into place. So, there was no sort of...
Alan and Linda would have been in that point at 365 where those systems were getting built.
Yeah, that's right. It was all
and
new.
Getting introduced and getting role played and obviously, and the thing for Alan and Linda that comes through both of their podcasts is that at the end of the day, they were the ones that walked the talk with that system. So they were obviously pushing the system as well. So with every opportunity that came, because of the success they were having, they then had to either invent the next thing or be seen as the people to push it forward. So obviously, all of a sudden we've got this X amount of stylists and they are doing great. What we're going to do with them? So was there ever a sort of an initial conversation of, right, you're going to go down the managerial thing, or did that just happen by osmosis? Or?
Yeah, I think it was very organic. All of a sudden you've got a few assistants and they're getting better. And I can't really remember, but I'm sure there would have been a conversation. But it would have been more a conversation coming from Linda to me. You're doing this and this and this. And I was always very driven. I was never really... it's never off sick.
What would have been your goal? So see at that point, because I find that really interesting as well, because it is, what do people think they're going to get out of the career? What do they think that's open to them? And you'd already sort of touched base in a couple of different... What would have been what was going to be your holy grail of being a hairdresser at that time anyway?
At that stage, I didn't really have... I didn't have a role model as such, and I wasn't really thinking along those lines. It was just a case of, like, I'm a new guy, I want to get established, and you could see, and in those days you had Linda Burdetty, who worked in Buchanan Street, and she was just busy. You know, that you heard this name, and then we used to have monthly meetings where the salons would all come together, and you know, and you would be talking to people, and you know, so, and I would go and talk to her. You know, I've always kind of, if somebody's doing a thing that you want to do, don't bugger about. Just go and ask them, talk to them. You know, speak to them and look and see. Well, if you can show me your numbers, then that gives me something tangible to sort of work towards. So that I remember doing that and having that conversation with Linda. You know, quite soon once I was in the company and you'd started meeting a few people.
And when did the twist come from you initially being at school and not liking arithmetic, not liking numbers, to then all of a sudden they come into Rainbow Room and them having that, you know, counting and knowing where you are so that you know where you're going and all that kind of stuff, and monitoring your performance, which was very much figures driven. When did that become all right in your artistic sensibility?
Well, my dad, again, he worked for an oil company, and when I was about 15 or 16, he came back from work with all this, it was cassettes on what was called psycho-cybernetics.
Right.
So basically psycho-cybernetics was developed by NASA to help learning and for the stuff that they were going to have astronauts able to cope with, you know, scooshing up to space at a squillion miles an hour and doing all this stuff. It was basically repackaged by Anthony Robbins as NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming. So I think through just listening to stuff and reading things, you know, if somebody tells you you're bright, the way I get told at school when I was little, you know, when they were doing all this IQ testing, if you've got evidence that says, well, you're this and this and this, and then you've got results that are, some are all right, some are not all right, when you've got a not all right result for something, it doesn't matter what it is, you want to understand why is that. And it could be easy to say, oh, it's because I wasn't listening or I was getting taught badly. But this psycho-cybernetic and NLP, it's about teaching you how to learn. So it's about applying what you know. That the definition of intelligence is using the knowledge you have. Yeah. You could be a genius. If you're just sitting in a room thinking about being a genius.
What are you going to do about it?
Who cares? So a lot of the, you know, I mean, you could ask Linda. I mean, I had a sheet on the wall in the staff room. I coloured in boxes to keep me on track to count. And of course, it then became sabotage. You know, so John would then colour in a box.
Of course he would.
You know, and you would get, so you had all sorts of nonsense. But it also helps to involve people. If you find something difficult and you can involve others in what's difficult for you, you start to discover that, oh, they find that easy. I'm like, brilliant. But there's something they find difficult that you don't.
Well, that's Branson, isn't it? It was like surrounding himself with people that could actually do the thing. But, you know, I'm the ideas guy, but you can help me.
You know, at the time going through it, you kind of, you know, hindsight's great because you can rose tint the thing, even if you don't mean to. You know, so I could sit and go, yes, I was, you know, I'd studied this and the next thing.
I planned this since I was 14, but...
You know, I kind of, there's a phrase like, you know, rubbish in, rubbish out, to just do with your brain. You know, if you're not reading things and learning and not getting better at something every day, then you're only going to get worse. So the processes of kind of making it creative helps. I mean, I still do, I do graphs for a train sheet for the stylist. You know, I'll flip the train sheet around so you can see all your numbers, and then quickly you plot it so you can see a visual on this is progressing, this is going up, down, whatever. So I would still do that.
And that's really important because obviously we've all we've all got to the job because at the end of the day we're all visual people to a certain extent. And yes, we are numbers people to a certain extent, but obviously we're visually kind of motivated. So if you're getting to, you know, you just want to see an arrow going up the way, and we always want to see it in green, and we never want to see it going down, we don't want to see it in red, do we?
And it was Linda that ended up, I mean, Alan started teaching me train sheets and numbers and P&L and all that sort of stuff, and just, I mean, he's got a brain, he's got a different brain, you know, he came from Stoke, so he's okay with numbers. You know, he gave up. And just passed me on to Linda.
It's still, I mean, that was the one thing when we were doing part one of his podcast, and he was talking about the idea that he came up with the system of instead of doing the end of the month cashing up thing, when he was doing the accounting thing, he would do it every day. So then he only had to get the last amount of numbers in from all the other kind of traders. So that then it wouldn't take him as long.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you fast forward all that time and you think of your accounting books and just, you know, being, you know, Kaizen and one better. And my head was just blown away, you know. But to this day, Linda will explain what your tax bill's going to be better than Alan's ever going to explain to me. And I don't know whether that's just because he just gets it.
I think he just gets it.
Yeah.
You know, it's something he's just naturally got a good ability at that I never had.
Yeah.
I learned more about numbers and maths when I was to help my son when he was growing up, when he was little, with Kumon, which is actually it's a Japanese learning style. And we did that for him because I don't want him growing up having the same issues. Because you could sit and watch a Formula One race, and, you know, they'd be in at the pits. There's a 4-year-old, I'm like, right, how many bolts are in that wheel jack? 5. How many's in the 4 wheels? 20.
Right.
But, you know, give him a bit of paper, like, what's 5 times 4? Yeah. You know, it was just being able to you've got to get connections in your head to understand. So, yeah, everybody has different connections in different areas.
Which obviously meant, that's one of the, you know, that kind of mindset's obviously what made you a good teacher, good manager.
I like knowing that somebody understands it. I don't want people to tell me they get it when you know that they don't. You just need honesty.
Do you not think everybody's a bit scared in that and just being able to say, I don't know?
It's coming from your school, you know. You're either going to be somebody the teacher asks you a question, you put your hand up straight away, answer it, get it right, and then the rest of the class call you a swot.
Yeah.
Or you put it up, get it wrong, and then the rest of the class you're a dafty.
Yeah.
Or you know it and you don't put your hand up, and then you're annoyed. Either way, you're annoyed always by how the school teacher approaches the thing. So, you know, just giving an answer.
And I think in the creative industry, whether it's art, design, fashion, music, food, I would include in that in our career, is all the great things have happened because people have got stuff wrong.
Yeah.
It's not because they got it. If everybody got everything right all the time, it would still be the same as it was 100 years ago. It's the fact that we've made mistakes.
It's just discovering a new way to get a different outcome.
Yeah. So, you're managing, you've built your clientele. When does the opportunity to get 24 kick in then? When is this happening?
Well, at some point, I think, I remember talking about, you know, just the next stage for me. And I'd had a conversation with Alan and Linda, but, you know, what do you want to do? Do you want to have, I want a salon. And the goal, I remember the goal was really, I said to her, when did you get 15? And she says, I was 28. I'm like, right, that's it. You know, so my goal very simply then became, I want a salon by the time I'm 28.
So it was an age thing?
Yeah. And at that stage, I started in the company when I was 23. So I think it was maybe about 26 when this sort of conversation started about, you know,
it's quite quick.
Getting a salon and doing all that. I never really thought about it. Maybe, yes, if you look back.
Well, if you go for something like the amount of time Linda spent in her previous employer before she came to Rainbow Room, with the understanding that it was never going to be an option at that time, and that was probably the way in hairdressing at the time, that you were either the staff or you were the boss, and there wasn't this projection, whereas they're obviously putting that in place, and you're the first person to do it out with Alan and Linda. So that, for that to happen, and it to happen in a short period of time, I think it's pretty amazing.
Well, so, I mean, at that stage, I just lost my mum, you know, so, you know, these things happen. It's, you know, it's grim. There's no question about it. But I'd only just left home, and was in a rented flat with a couple of mates. And then, you know, my dad appears like in the middle of the night, you know, with the news that my mum's passed away. And, you know, and at that stage, you don't know how to deal with stuff. So I probably just did what I saw my dad do, just threw himself into work. Yeah. You know, so that was it really. I just worked. And I remember the flat I was in, didn't really have that much money, and it was cold in the winter, so it was cheaper to come in. So, you know, I was in 6 days because financially it was better for me because I wasn't having to pay to heat the flat. And I thought the more I do, the faster I'm going to get where I want to be.
Wow.
But I didn't necessarily know where I wanted to be.
Yeah.
So from day one, you know, that was more or less what had happened. And I didn't know any of the staff, so none of the staff knew the circumstance of what had just happened to me, you know, literally maybe weeks before I'd started. So,
and obviously, you know, some of the stuff you've said at the start, you weren't really bothered whether you were going to be stepping on people's toes either to get the salon.
I was there to kind of learn and to kind of start. And I think having been away and wondering whether hairdressing was right, because when I'd done my training, you know, the salon, it was Kilmarnock. It's a different town now, but in those days, it was quite rough.
Yeah.
You know, you would go out in your lunch hour and get chased.
Right.
All you're doing is trying to go and get a sausage roll or a can of Coke, and there were a bunch of young people that would see you and not recognise you and think, right, let's chase them.
Right.
So, of course, you'd be running back to the salon, in the door, turning round and saying cheerio. So the kind of whole sort of working and just going through, you thought, well, I don't want to do this kind of hairdressing. I don't want to be with these kinds of people.
Yeah.
But I didn't know who I wanted to be with.
Yeah.
But I knew that there'll come a point, there's got to be other people that think the way I think, that have got the kind of backgrounds and just are the kind of people that I would want to sort of be hanging about with. There was some I worked with, but a lot of people weren't like that. But they were hard-working people.
And do you think that was a motivator for you to actually want to have your own salon? So you rather than finding your tribe, is actually creating your tribe around you?
No, not at all. The drive to be, it was just to be in charge of me. You know, the thought of some lunatic being in charge of me that I didn't know was a lunatic.
Yeah.
And then 20 years down the road, you find out, oh, they really are a lunatic.
Yeah.
So, you know, the thought of trusting my life to somebody else was more of a bother. So it was more the desire, if my life's going to be a failure, I want it to be my failure. If my life's going to go all right, I want it to be because I know what I did to get the things. Yeah. So it was very much, it was that. I mean, the whole idea, once you start it, you start seeing, when you start employing people, and you go through all this sort of training, and, you know, you employ people. And at the end of the day, people get jobs because they're good at interviews sometimes. They're not necessarily good at the job, they're just good at the interview. Yeah. And I'd love to have a magic wand where you would know. But you don't think about building up your own sort of group of people that are like-minded initially, because you don't know how could you possibly know that you're going to be able to achieve that. You see the power of it, because just after I'd started, then John started, and then Coco and these hairdressers we just all got each other completely. There was really strong competitiveness with all of us, but it was really positive. You know, it was, you were constantly reminded.
It had a tone, 15.
Yeah, there was just,
had a tone.
There was a real, just a unique sort of bond. You know, John always had my back, Coco, everybody, we always had each other's back. You could help each other. And then when I started sort of moving into managing, you know, they were instrumental in behaving in the way that you'd want people around you, you know. So I wasn't their boss, but I'd made the transition from being one of them to being in charge of them in a certain sort of way. So you see the power of, like, just connecting with people and having like-minded people that have got the same values and
around you
and everything else.
So, with the idea of the buck stops here, we'll stop here for part one, and we'll get our head round what you've said, and then we'll dive into the beginning of 24 and that journey to the present day in part two. So, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.